Hey everyone, it's Blair here at Time Trades. Thanks for joining me this weekend. We've got lots to cover, tons of stuff and headlines in the news. I'm not going to be focused on that. I'm going to stay focused on our framework for making better trading decisions using timing information. So we're going to start just by reviewing our framework, starting with price and then going into context and then finally looking at daily forecasts. And we're going to come up with what I believe is a likely path for price over the next few weeks. So stick with me and for the next few minutes and hopefully we'll end up with a roadmap for price for the next few weeks. Okay, so let's take a look at what we are seeing in the markets right now. Okay, so when it comes to price, we look at a number of different things. We look at price relative to the magic levels, which are the white and orange lines here, and also relative to the VWAPs. These are the blue curved lines. Obviously with the moves down over the last few days and weeks and that very significant flush down on February 24th, price is below most of the VWAPs, but what's interesting is we're starting to see elements of a bottom here, right? Because it did tag the white line, the white magic level, and it reversed quite sharply. And we see that not just in the Qs, but we see that kind of support behavior in a number of other indexes. Also looking at the Dow came close to its magic level at 322 there, but didn't touch it. And we can look at spiders. So price is not universally bearish. Of course, it's bearish because it's below all the VWAPs, and it's bearish because of the bear trend that's obvious. It's going down. But it did reverse, and this is the key takeaway here, that did reverse where it should, which is right on the magic levels here. Okay, so let's go back and take a look at context. Okay, so when we look at context, we can look at the timing, the cheat code time periods, short-term waves, and Gann waves, because this is important because not every day is the same. So when we look at the spiders or the Qs, we've finished our two teal lines in the cheat code time period here. So we got through those, and what typically happens with these, and this isn't a guarantee, this is just observations of past behavior, is we tend to see major pivots around this timeline. Okay. And one of the things I noticed, especially on the day of these cheat code days, whether it's a teal line or whether it's a purple line, is significantly increased volatility. It really kind of feels like you're in a blender on the day of these cheat code timing days. And then it only starts to make sense like a day or two afterwards, right? So now here we are a day or two after the teal line day. So that means we're roughly halfway through the green period here in the time trades timing indicator. So if we go and turn that on, and oops, we still have the old version here. Yeah, we'll just change the inputs here, cheat code timing zones, turn that on, and there. So we have the right version. But if we take a look here, we've got the teal lines, they're about halfway through the green period, okay? And historically, this tends to indicate a time for a major pivot, okay? So we've been basically bearish for most of this green period so far. We're in the timing zone for when we start to see major pivots. Does this mean that we turn around and go straight back up here? I don't think so. I think we've got a little bit more work to do to build a base before we start going back up. And of course, with all of the horrible headlines and geopolitical situation, things we could definitely make a lower low before we go back up. And when I say going back up, it doesn't mean back up to the top of this green box. it could just be a small correction or a recovery. Okay. So as far as context, we're in the context of a time period where we can expect to see a major reversal. But that being said, I think there's still a bunch of bad news that has to be digested, and also some timing indications that there's likely to be a few more corrective moves down coming up in the next few days. Okay, so that's context. All right, so let's go and take a look at what Time Trades is saying here for the daily forecast. So we're going to flip over to Safari. We've got our Time Trades web application up. We've got the Qs here, and we finished a big down move, of course, on the 24th, on Thursday last week. There was a very sudden bounce up from that. And now we're in a period where it's kind of no man's land, at least for the Q forecast. So there's not a lot happening here in terms of moves up or moves down. Let's see if we can learn anything from any of the other symbols that we track. So let's take a look at spiders. Spiders is a little bit more informative. We're showing probability of moves down here. Relatively low, but they are 2 standard deviations. So Monday has a 14% probability of a 2 standard deviation move down. And then we have a 56% probability of a pivot low on March 4th. Okay, so spiders are indicating a move down this week. If we look at the Dow, what can we learn here? The Dow isn't giving us much to act on this week in the forecast. However, there's this huge cluster of pivot highs over here, April 1st, April 18th, that is lending some support to this theory that we can see a major pivot and see it relatively soon. And we also see this little stub here of 2 standard deviation moves up around March 16th. So from March 16th into April, early April, maybe mid-April, we're starting to see like there could be some moves up. Okay, let's look at IWM. Now, IWM's been showing a lot of strength recently, and I was kind of curious about that. So I drilled into some of the data behind IWM, and what's really behind this move is a lot of the oil well servicing firms are part of the IWM index. So these are organizations that are highly levered to the price of oil. Basically, they're geared to the amount of drilling activity that's going on, and coming out of 2020 and early 21, when there was very little drilling activity happening, they were really beaten down. But now they're starting to get a lot more business, and that's reflecting in the IWM index, which is very strong here the last couple of days. And there's a forecast for it to keep moving higher up into this scan wave yellow period. Okay, so that's a lot of information, but how do we sum it all up? Well, I've taken a stab at summing it all up here. If we go to the Qs, and last week we completed what I would consider a very successful forecast path of the Qs. So let me just turn off the timing zones. We know we're in the green period, and we will be for the next few weeks, so we don't need to see that anymore. So I wanted to update the forecast price path here, and let me just restore that. There we go. Okay, so after reviewing the Qs, the spiders, the Dow, and a few major stocks like Apple, this is my updated forecast path here of what I think is a likely path for price. Now, it's important to understand that the pivots here are dates and not prices. I'm not making any forecast here about prices. What I am forecasting are dates. Okay, so this is based on information that's in the time trades forecast for the Qs, the spiders, and Apple. And I've assimilated that all together into a yellow path here that is what I believe to be most likely. And, you know, there's nothing written in stone about this. You're welcome to create your own forecast path of price by looking at a bunch of different time trades forecasts and pulling it together using your own perspective. And I invite you to do that. This is just my perspective and how everything could fit together. And it's taking into account the cheat code time periods, because I really believe that the cheat code time periods are probably the most important thing with respect to creating one of these paths going forward. You'll notice that a lot of the time we see pivots within a day of one of the cheat code time period lines, or right in the middle between them. Okay, sometimes we see pivots like this, that where there's two pivots in a given cheat code time period, but often you'll see them either right on a given day or halfway between two purple lines or two teal lines. Okay. Another observation I've made about price with respect to these cheat code time periods is it's extremely rare for price to move in a straight line for more than one whole time cycle. So if you look at this time period starting at January 11th, going through to January 26th, basically moved in one direction. You almost never see price extend for, say, 1.5 or even two cycles. That's uncommon. I never say never, but it's just rare. So based on these likely pivot points, which are purple and teal lines, and halfway in between them, and also the time trades forecast, this is what I think is the likely path of price here. And I'm taking a guess here that we make a bottom sometime soon and start moving up. That doesn't have to be correct. It's really a forecast of dates, with the next pivot date being March 4th. The key reason for that March 4th date is if we go back to time trades here and look at the spiders, it's what's behind that upcoming pivot low date is really the spiders forecast on March 4th. And we've got another couple days of down forecast this week. And so that's really the motivation there. And then after that, we start to see some moves up in the spiders coinciding with this yellow Gann wave time period. Okay, so that's the logic behind this path. I'll be sharing that on Twitter as well. So feel free to take that and use it or change it or build your own path. I invite you to do that. Okay, so let's take a look at some stocks now in time trade, starting with the big guys, Apple and Amazon. If I can type correctly. Okay, so here's Apple. Now, Apple's a little bit contradictory right now because we've got a giant pivot low here, March 3rd. Again, this lends confidence to this forecast pivot of March 4th that I've got in the yellow path forecast that I just did. But there's also declining moves down, declining probability of moves down. So in this case, what I'm doing is I'm putting more confidence in the pivot low forecast than I am in the move down forecast. I'm kind of discounting the information that's here because I know that based on the numbers, that the accuracy of pivot lows and pivot highs is higher than the accuracy of one standard deviation moves. Okay, so that is Apple in the near term. We've got a pivot low forecast March 3rd. So that's what we're looking for this week. Let's take a look at Amazon. Amazon, not a lot here of information. If we take a look, probably the biggest element is the pivot high March 14th. Let's look at Google. So Google has mostly one standard deviation down moves until March 16th. And March 16th, again, is one of those pivot dates in my QQQ forecast. So if we go over here and take a look at March 16th is one of those pivot lows. So this is one of the reasons why, and you'll see March 16th turn up as a pivot low in a lot of other stocks as well. So let's take a look at NVIDIA. NVIDIA, again, has a big cluster of pivot lows, March 14th, 15th, 16th, and also has a little bit of bearish probability. If we look up here in the one standard deviation moves down on March 4th, we're showing a 42% probability of a one standard deviation move down in NVIDIA. Let's look at Netflix. Netflix, kind of similar to NVIDIA with some one standard deviation moves down, some very small probabilities of one standard deviation moves up. I would discount those quite a bit, and pivot high over here, April 1. So if we go and take a look at our forecast, we've got April 1 showing as one of those pivot highs as well. So I'm pulling in information from a lot of different stocks to build that path. And finally, we can take a look at Tesla. Okay, so Tesla got a lot of activity in the forecast. There could be some great trading opportunities given the wide ranges that we see in Tesla. Mid-March here looks like a little bullish opportunity, but I think the real fun is going to get started at the end of March when we see a pivot low followed by a two standard deviation move up, followed by a pivot high on April 12th. So keep an eye on Tesla. I think the immediate trend is down here, but that's going to set up some nice bullish moves starting in mid-March. Okay, so that's it for stocks. Let's take a look at crypto, starting with Bitcoin. Bitcoin has a little bit of a contradictory forecast here with a cluster of one standard deviation moves up, as well as a pivot low on March 4th and a pivot high on March 1st. So I think overall, though, the price action in Bitcoin has been quite constructive. If we take a look at where it is relative to the magic lines, it's really done quite well. So let's just, these yellow lines here were from my last forecast attempt, which really didn't work out well. I thought this last forecast here, starting February 17th, would be up starting at the middle. That was 180 degrees wrong. So maybe we will start to see some constructive price action from Bitcoin here, especially if it can regain this white magic line here at 39,600. If it can regain that and hold above that. Now remember, when price crosses one of these magic levels, often you'll see it go to the next orange line and then come back for a retest and then go. Okay, so keep an eye out for that. In general, the majority of the forecast on Bitcoin is on the bullish side, okay? So if we just want to ignore all of the one standard deviation forecasts and simply look at the pivots, we're seeing a bullish forecast here, especially starting March 4th and going up to April 7th. So could be a very strong month for Bitcoin here. Let's take a look at Luna because it's been flying lately and Time Trades thinks it's going to keep flying. There's a beautiful cluster of both 1 and 2 standard deviation moves up here for the next, week or so. So Luna is in great shape, and then actually almost for the next 3 weeks, there's nothing but tailwind for longs in this coin. So it's far from ending. This initial push here looks like it's got legs and could last for a while. And another one that caught my eye here is Ripple. There's nothing really interesting in the short term on Ripple, but after March 11th and this small probability pivot low, there's quite a change in tone in Ripple, and there's an extended period of 1 and 2 standard deviation up moves in the forecast. So again, that looks like another candidate for a strong move up. And we'll take a quick look at Litecoin here. Litecoin, very similar to Ripple in that when it gets started in early March, it looks like it could run for a considerable amount of time. All right, now let's wrap things up with a quick view of Indian stocks. We can review a couple of the stocks that we've been looking at in prior weeks, starting with Asian Paints. So this was a bearish forecast that we had, and that has played out very nicely. There's maybe a little bit left in this bearish forecast. We don't see a pivot low really happening until March 15th. But this isn't really a great cluster of 1 standard deviation moves down, but definitely it could continue for another couple of weeks. I would look to take profits on big moves down here on Asian Paints if you did take that short, because it looks like once March 15th hits, the forecast gets pretty cluttered. There's no clear pattern here with lots of pivot highs and pivot lows alternating. So it looks pretty choppy in general after that. Let's take a quick look at Divi's Labs. So we go to the models page and we can take a look at Divi's. And Divi's Labs is another short that worked out really well in the last week or so. And it looks like we're going to have another wave down starting next week. We might get a couple days down this week, but next week, the week ending March 11th, it looks like there's another cluster of high probability down days in Divi's Labs. On the bullish side among Indian stocks, if we take a look at Vedanta, Vedanta has a very compelling bullish case coming up with multiple up waves in the future. So starting really this week, we've got some strong up probabilities of Vedanta. And then there's another wave starting with this pivot low on March 17th. And that can turn into another wave. So we can look at all these pivots here and just kind of play pong with these pivots as it's very strong. You want to play this from the long side. You don't want to take any shorts. Any pivot high days would be a great opportunity to take profits, and then you can re-enter on the pivot low days and then ride these 1 probability up moves up until the next pivot high days. So looks like some great bullish trading opportunity here on Vedanta. And that's the video for this week. I hope you found this helpful. Thank you again for using time trades, and good luck and good trading. Bye now.